Tell us a bit about marketing as competition.
If you keep solving enough great problems that people have, you get to win. So I need to keep solving the right problems to win.
Jo McClintock, who's one of the UK's top 100 marketers and Chief Marketing Officer at Trainline, a business driving over $6 billion in sales and reshaping how we travel.
Some of the creative areas and creative topics where things are abstract, things aren't black and white, things cannot be answered that easily. ChatGPT and any AI product can be very complementary to that, not necessarily replace it.
Jo shares why marketers should see themselves as protagonists, pushing thinking forward, building moats that competitors can't cross.
To be a brilliant marketeer today, you have to just keep pushing things forward and pushing that thinking and just avoid being reductive.
How do you support and develop talent internally?
How do I describe it?
She really reveals insights on innovation, resilience, and developing the next generation of talent. So let's dive right in. Jo, it's fantastic to have you on.
Thank you.
You often say that marketers should be more like protagonists. So, tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that, and how should marketers sort of step more forcefully into that role?
Cool. So, I love this idea of being a protagonist, and I think marketers have got two key jobs. One is to build a moat, and that's those are not my words. They are, they are used frequently, but ultimately that's about making sure that you've got a brand that people love, a product that they really want to use on a regular basis, and it's really sticky, and it's really hard for competitors to kind of get in there, whether they've got more money than you or, more resources than you. You have that really strong moat. And the other part marketers need to do is push the thinking. So, I think the wonderful thing about marketers is that they're both creative and mathematical, scientific, right? So in some ways you can think big and think differently and abstract about ideas and concepts, but also you can bring it back down to earth with, data and science and hypotheses and tests and all that jazz. But pushing the thinking is about being a protagonist. It's saying, actually, this thing we're doing here, is it good enough? Could it be better? Could we do it differently? Have we thought about this problem space in the right way? And actually, that I think is a really exciting place for marketers to exist in.
Oh, gosh, I so agree with you. Interesting. And I love your terminology around building that moat. Give us the playbook. What are some of the key things that you think about in being able to do that?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, everyone has a marketing budget of some kind, small or big. And the danger is if you don't think about moat building, really it's about how deep are your pockets quite often. And actually people can often outspend you, or they can, find ways to undercut how you're doing things from a channel perspective or a spend perspective. So building a moat is actually, for those of you that I don't know who are listening who don't know what a moat is, it's something that protects a castle, and it's a very, very British thing. But ultimately it's going, well, if I didn't have all the money in the world, and I've got a competitor who can outspend me, ultimately I need to make sure that I've got something right here that people really want more than anything else in the world, and they're willing really to kind of either go the extra mile to try it or find it, or ultimately we cut through any spend that any competitor really puts out in front of us. So building that moat is actually making sure you have a great proposition, a brand people love, and then ultimately then it doesn't rely on marketing dollars or that constant competition, whether it be in the Google SERP or just brand dollars in share of voice.
Really cool.
So I was going back to my days on the beach, when you build the sandcastles and the waves would erode the moat and all that. But already what we're getting into, language like protagonists and competition and so on. So there's a bit of a sort of a competitive spark already coming through.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about marketing as competition.
Yeah.
Because you talk about, undermining competitor spend and so on. There's a cut and thrust in your language. Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, I'm going to refer to a film. I don't know if anyone's watched The Martian.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
By Matt Damon.
Yes.
I love that film. And it's fun. It's crazy. It's obviously completely surreal. But just a quick recap. He finds himself on Mars. There's a storm. His colleagues leave the planet, and he's stuck there. Doesn't have any food, water, all of that jazz. And ultimately, he's got to find a way to live, right, and survive or get off this planet. And there's a kind of whole sort of section in it where it kind of tells a story about how he found a way to grow food, and then how he found a way to create water. And really, this at the end of the film, it talks about if you solve enough problems, you get to win. Or in his case, he got to come home. And so for me, I think about like actually, ultimately brands exist to solve a problem in the world in some way, shape or form. And if you keep solving enough great problems that people have, you get to win. And that competitiveness or that competitive spirit is about going, well, I've created something, the world moves, the world changes, consumer needs move and change. So I need to keep solving the right problems to win. And so I think about building brands and, and building that moat and being that protagonist on the basis that you need to keep solving problems to win, in Matt Damon style. So
I tell you, I'm just reminded of that scene in the movie at the end where he's talking. I think when you talk about all the problems to then come home, he was in that lecture theatre.
It's exactly that moment he says that. Yeah.
Ah, God, it's so true.
Yes.
Related that to Trainline. Clearly, I mean, you guys have been on a juggernaut. I mean, it's $6 billion in sales. I mean, you're really doing a fantastic work there. And we've already said you've got to solve enough problems. So I'm sure there's a multitude of them that you are solving for to achieve what you're now doing. But if there was a few ingredients to call out, which kind of helps to be the hallmark of getting on that growth trajectory, what would you call out as some of those key levers?
I mean, there's always the market context. So I think in the UK for Trainline, it's been about, for a long time, it's about digitization, people moving to more use of phone when it comes to transportation. And I think we were forefront of that. So
totally.
All the ticketing gates you see in train stations, Trainline worked with the industry to put that in place and the ticketing platform at a category level. And then in our international markets, that's been very much about, in the UK, John Major basically privatised the railways and ultimately there was competition, therefore you needed an aggregator, etc. In Europe, that's what's happening now. So ultimately there's that kind of market context where you are playing into a moment in time. I'd say there's a first mover advantage on a lot of that. So whether it be in, the UK where you get the kind of like digital dividend of COVID where people, transformed over, or as people are adopting different technologies, whether it be ChatGPT, search, we're already doing really well there in terms of how we show up in geo search, or whether it be, for example, in Europe, where it's ultimately a moment in time where competition is opening up and we are just there going, well, we're here. Here's a solution to a customer problem, which is you don't know what train ticket to buy, and here it is. So I would say definitely always leaning into what the market context is and taking first mover advantage. But in parallel, we have to make sure that, at some point, first mover advantage starts to sort of like wane. And actually, you need to be building a great product that evolves over time, a brand that people consider more. And it's kind of, I would say, those three ingredients.
There's definitely more to say on that, but I'm just going to hop on for a moment to the geo point. So we did a brilliant webinar yesterday, Max Sinclair, Azoma, illuminating this topic, hundreds of people attending.
I saw that and I need to watch that actually.
Well, we can send you the link for the playback.
Yes.
It was a stonker. But we've interviewed loads of CMOs. You're the first person saying as cleanly as that, we're starting to learn the rules of the game here and we think we're doing okay. Just share a little bit of that experience.
I mean, we have an amazing team that's kind of like iterating on this continuously. Obviously, it's small fry in terms of like our overall traffic and overall profile today, but ultimately it's a no-brainer. Like all the graphs show that it's going to do this, right?
Exactly.
It's a hockey stick of and. I know we were talking earlier about the use of ChatGPT and that conversation style. Well, if you asked it, I need to buy a train ticket to York, it's going to give you an answer. And it's going to give you like the tools to buy the ticket, or it's going to buy it for you. So if you're not in the game right now, you've lost down the line. So which is why I talk about first mover advantage. Geo for me is exactly the same. I think the interesting thing there, which I'm not quite sure how it's going to play out yet, is trust. So if I think about, when as Google came on board and you had SERPs and SEO and then paid ads and all of that, also what came with it was things like TripAdvisor and Trustpilot and all these different brands that helped you go, do I trust this result? Does it really give me the answer? I think one of the interesting things that, I'm exploring with the guy who in our team who's nailing that, in my opinion, is how do you build trust into this? How do you build some kind of like, this brand is going to give you the answer to the geo question, but it's one I really trust and I really want to buy from.
Today's program is brought to you by two fantastic organizations. First up is Studio Space, a leading on-demand marketing agency platform. Studio Space gives marketers complete control over their projects, from matching the right agency to your brief, to managing contracts and invoicing, and even tracking all of your spend data all in the one place. They take care of everything and it's totally hassle-free. They even guarantee the work. So check out Studio Space today. Our second sponsor is the Marketing Skills Trust, a charity with a mission to make marketing a better place for everyone. They provide grants to help create a more equitable industry and support initiatives that really do drive diversity, inclusion, and create opportunity. The trust has been instrumental in leveling up the marketing skills across the board. And do take a look at their website for more information. Now, let's get on with the show. I'm so glad that you're a believer because, in fact, as Max was describing yesterday, it feels like quite a polarized audience that he speaks to people on either sides of the coin, depending where you sit. But one of the things he was talking about actually was the role of paid advertising. In fact, maybe the diminishing role of paid advertising over time as this starts to eclipse.
Yep.
And that, I think, comes fundamentally down to your trust point. I mean, he talked about the user experience on Google. And in fact, if you've got your top 3-4 searches, which you know people have paid to be there,
absolutely.
how does that then psychologically impact your ability to trust versus what you described right here? What a fascinating area to be in. I mean, I think the other area which I'm when I think about Trainline, it's so synonymous. You must have the vast majority of awareness in the country, and I'm sure in Europe as you build there. And when I think about digital first brands, I often wonder, when you're thinking about the growth trajectory. I mean, people often talk to Amazon being the largest TV advertiser in the country today. I mean, how do you view being a digital only brand, then looking at above the line channels?
A huge amount of our spend is in above the line channels, and I would say it obviously ebbs and flows depending on what the campaign is and what we're trying to do. But, we're in the kind of 60-40 range.
Yeah. And classic.
It's not landed there like by kind of like, pick this number out of the air. But it was more actually obviously through science and testing. But I think it just all comes down to basics, to be quite honest with you, which is ultimately, we've got high brand awareness. You kind of largely want people come directly to your product. We need people more to consider us more for different types of trips, or actually perhaps for just avoiding that kind of natural habit of going to Google for things. So that's where obviously above the line advertising or brand advertising helps do that, builds that direct relationship. We test every single thing we do. So every channel is part of a tested playbook. So whilst it's kind of, it is a significant part of our spend, it's all kind of proven out from an ROI perspective versus performance marketing channels. So we know all the multipliers of every single thing that we do. I think for us, it's going, okay, what's the objective, audience, all the classic stuff, what behavior we're trying to change, what's the right plan to do that, and is it proven? And what's the ROI on that? So, and some of it is bets, right? Like we've bet on some things and we've gone football sponsorship in Spain. Never done football sponsorship before, and ultimately,
But backed up by evidence, I'm sure. I mean, educated bets.
Educated bets. I mean, we did a huge teardown of, the audience impressions. We came up with a model, it's like a scorecard to go comparatively versus brand advertising. How would you rate this on a CPM basis? Ultimately, and then we went, okay, based on these CPMs, what have we seen previously on ROIs? Let's have a go and figure it out. So, it worked really well.
So you mentioned science and testing and then went on to elaborate a little bit. So it sounds to me like you've developed your playbook.
We feel good about it.
And obviously you've had stints at Moonpig, Labara, Skyscanner and so on. Tell us about how you've built and accumulated this playbook over time.
Made mistakes, definitely, as part of that. I mean, those ones where you had to stand in front of the CEO and go, I've done this, sorry about this, like thinking, oh God, don't fire me. I think my biggest learning actually came from Screwfix, so 20 years ago,
wow.
Very long time ago. I worked for an amazing CEO at the time, and he kind of plucked me out of, I was on this high potential scheme. I didn't go to university. I was a bit ashamed of that for a long time because I was thought, oh God, I was supposed to have gone down this track, and I got a little bit lost, and I had done all my A-levels and I could have gone, but I was like, I don't really know what I want to do. And so they kind of just put me into these different jobs, and I was in a logistics role. And I was like 18 or 19, and they were like, can you figure out this problem? And then they said, oh, can you come and figure out segmentation in marketing? And I was like, what is even segmentation? I have no idea. And so they taught me like segmentation, which was a very mathematical, piece of work. But what was great was I kind of understood the laws of what drove customers and the economics of your business. And then you go, well, put alongside that, actually where are the opportunities to grow at market level? And I think what was really great for me there was kind of thinking about customer strategy and starting everything from a customer strategy. And then ultimately, as I've gone through all of my career, I've just always started there. So you know where the money is, you know what the kind of like who that is, you know where to find them, you know what your gaps are in your proposition, and actually perhaps your marketing strategy. And then I feel everything is quite simple when it falls off of that, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. You don't need to go to university to learn that, frankly. And let's go on that for a moment, because 1/3 of entry-level jobs have disappeared already since the inception of OpenAI. Next 3 to 5 years, another third. Only 1/3 of those entry-level jobs, be it graduate or internship or whatever it is. So it's becoming much harder. And so I don't know, what do you make of all that? What role for university? You've got young kids growing up.
Yeah.
I mean, what would your advice maybe be to people who are thinking about careers right in their early days? Because a lot of what we do is about career management, career expansion and acceleration.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a rubbish question. I've gone all over the place, but you get a sense of it. What's your take?
I mean, obviously there's a bit about what you're good at. There's, ultimately forcing yourself in. If someone forced me to be, I don't know, an engineer, I'd be an awful engineer. And I'd say, please take me out of this role. I'm not safe anywhere near this stuff. So there's a bit about what you're good at. I guess, I think there's a human element to things still. And I mean, obviously I know there's lots of arguments against that, AI can have that human element. It can, replace that kind of thoughts and feelings. But, I feel like still some of the creative areas and creative topics where things are abstract, things aren't black and white, things cannot be answered that easily with, and some of them don't have prior evidence to say that this is the right thing or the wrong thing. That's where kind of new innovation and ideas come from, right? And actually, I think ChatGPT and any AI product can be very complementary to that, not necessarily replace it. So I think it's like, how do you use modern technology alongside like the beauty of all that, creative juices we have as humans and bring some of that together. I guess, I only somewhat can comment on what I've heard myself and read, but actually I genuinely still feel with all technology, how it's developed over time, that still has never been replaced. That makes sense. I don't know if it ever could.
I love your thinking around the role of innovation and constantly pushing the frontier. And to that extent, and in fact, you talk about a Trainline, part of the success, the moat, first mover advantage.
Yeah.
It comes with the risk and reward.
Absolutely.
How do you how do you think about first mover advantage innovation? But two, how do you convince your organization to place those bets in how you go about doing it to kind of figure out what's going to win?
I think there's a bit about culture. So the culture of the organization in a lot of spaces and places does have a growth mindset, which is great. So you're already playing into an audience that's going, I'm open and willing to try new things. So I'd say, how do you build a culture or a growth mindset culture, like openness to try new things, basically? The second thing would be like, ultimately, no one's going to ask for you to do stuff, and don't ask permission. If you've got an idea or you've got a thought or a path, and you just kind of, you develop a little bit more and actually go, what could this thing be? What would the level of investment look like? What might an ROI look like? Or you might not even know that at that stage. And I think there's this kind of like, bring ideas to the table, and actually maybe, you'll get permission occasionally just to crack on. And then eventually what I've found over time is that one or two of these ideas have landed well. And then I just put more in front of people. And then, I might bring 20 ideas to the table and they'll only go, yeah, that one. But actually it's kind of like just constantly going, pushing thinking, bringing ideas and thoughts to the table, developing that, but also working cross-functionally, right? And it's not about you being the hero and showing up with all the ideas. It's like, hey, product team, I've been thinking about this. How do you think about it in coming together, as it were?
Joe, I've been in organizations where, I mean, you talk about growth mindset, but actually what tends to happen is they point to failures as quickly as they point to successes. And, you know, there seems to always somehow or the other end up being a fall guy for those things that didn't quite go our way. And I wonder how you view that and how do you overcome that in that sense? Because in organizations, sometimes politically charged organizations, you're like, you know, something doesn't go right. And it's just, you know, it kind of almost taints your reputation through and through, whilst maybe people should see it a different way.
I think it's that if you always start with a hypothesis, because a hypothesis is to be proven, right? Either correctly or incorrectly. And it might be that you get it wrong, which is absolutely fine as well. And so if you show up with a hypothesis and say, look, you know, I think by, I don't know, let's say, you know, leaning into music, we're going to get a higher LTV from youth customers.
Yep.
One example, right?
Yep.
And here's all the data points that back it up. Here's a big idea that's going to bring this to life. Here's a media plan or a strategy to take it to market. And here's how I know that it's worked or not. And then ultimately, I then revert back and go, this is what I've learned. And, you know, and this is what we've learned over time. And then as you go with that, you go, well, we think this bit worked. Didn't think that bit worked. And maybe we might iterate it. So I think it's like, start with a hypothesis. It's straight, really data backed, super transparent about what you know and what you don't know.
Yep.
Get buy-in for that. And then just keep coming back with like, what's happened, you know, and actually, is it working? Is it not working? And then it's more of a discussion than I like that. Here is the answer. And, you know, I'm going to tell you that this is what's going to work. And then ultimately people go, well, that doesn't work. So I think it ends up being hypothesis and then prove it out and discuss as you go along. So
we talked a little bit about winning and bets. And then you said standing in front of the CEO and hoping that she or he doesn't fire me. So I'm guessing you've had a moment or two along the way. Tell us about
probably
some of those moments where you've kind of had to find a way through in the face of, you know, something hasn't gone well. You've got a CEO who's not happy. Just, you know, those key stakeholder moments.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some like complete mess ups, but like where we've put like the wrong flag on a creative, and obviously you're like, oh my god, I could.
How does that get through?
Yeah, it was a really complicated taxi wrap, and I actually took the CEO at the time down to the design studio to show how it could have happened, and he went, I can see how it could have happened. And it was like, actually, here's all the checks and balances we're going to put in place now. And he was like, right,
smart move.
fair enough.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it was kind of, I mean, I went in when I found out straight away and I said, listen, you need to know this, etc. And this is how much it's going to cost, etc. So I think there's a bit about leaning into like your mistake as quickly as possible and going, I've done this and this is what I'm going to do about it. And actually come along and find out a bit more if you want to find out a bit more about what happened and why. The other part there is like, I guess that's taking accountability at the end of the day. The other part I did, one of them was at Moonpig. We had a great head of social who it's all over the news, so I can say it. But basically, somebody kept uploading like nude pictures or trying to upload nude pictures to cards. And well, head of social said, wouldn't it be funny if we just told them to stop? And so he put out a post that said something like, please stop uploading nude pics. It's against our T's and C's. And of course, it went massively viral. At the time, I was like, oh,
you must have known that was going to happen.
God. And well, I was kind of like, maybe it will, maybe it won't. At the time, I thought, oh God, how's this going to go down? But actually, everyone like loved it. And I was like, hey, listen, there's no harm done, you know, and ultimately actually just builds on the fun of the brand. I think sometimes there's obviously genuine mistakes like the flag one, and then there's the taking risks. Yeah. And I go a bit like to your winning kind of piece. Having a growth mindset is also about taking risks. And actually, obviously, they're somewhat educated risks. And sometimes, like in this case, it was probably a little bit of a punt. And, you know, ultimately it paid off. I don't know if it could have gone badly. It might have done. I was lucky in that instance. But I would say in all instances, like when you're kind of doing something that's kind of out of the ordinary, and there is a risk of it not going to plan, as long as you have a hypothesis, as long as you kind of have a reason why you did it, and actually largely you've got trust with leadership, it'll work out. But just take accountability for everything.
Sage words and at pace. So that was it.
Yeah, pace, yeah.
Joe, I really like your example about the taxi wrap and the CEO actually taking the time to come down to figure it out and work with you. And I'm sure that's as much of a great relationship builder as anything for the next time around. What do you think? What would be some of the ways in which you can forge really good relationships, stakeholder relationships? CEO, you talk about leadership teams, and more so reflecting on how others may be able to form great relationships with you from your team.
Yeah. So I use. God, it sounds calculating when I say this. When I say it to people, they're like, okay, and I'm thinking, God, it sounds really calculating, but it's not. So I use like Dunbar's number. So basically the relationship, it's like concentric circles, 5, 15, 50, 150, etc. So 150 is the people you can have a drink down the pub with. 5 is your kind of like next of kin. And I kind of apply that to work. And I go, right, 5, 15, 50. And I go, where are people in my Dunbar's numbers, as it were? And where do I need them to be? And I need them to be there because ultimately either we're going to work closely together, we need to build more empathy, we need to smooth out processes, smooth out, even relationship challenges. And so when you think about building relationships in that way, first of all, I'm quite strategic about who and how, and then actually just spending time with that person, right? Getting to know them as an individual, and really kind of just finding what their concerns are, their worries are, trying to answer them, and just keeping up that regular contact and that regular relationship, but also have difficult conversations as well. So lean into the difficult ones and go, actually, like, hey, that moment there when you said that in that meeting, it wasn't cool, or actually, I don't feel comfortable about the way you're thinking about this. If you don't have those conversations or have that basis of relationship, and you don't know where people are coming from, you're almost somewhat stunted a little bit in terms of your progress that you can make. So,
by the way, just for all those, I mean, Dunbar was an anthropologist, right? And his whole notion was that if you have, I think 150 relationships that you can have at any one time, and so choose them wisely. What a wonderful reframing of that.
There's a company, can't remember the name, will come back to me, that has scaled very quickly, and every time they get 150 people in an office, they build a new office.
Interesting.
Maximum number of 150 employees in any one entity, because it is the limit of human relationships.
So true. And what you spoke to there, Jo, was the thought about really kind of having really good psychological safety in your work relationships. And I think that is so key. In fact, I was having a conversation just last week, and the person I was speaking to said, look, I was in this organization for a couple of years, but every single time I had a conversation, it was like looking behind me.
Right.
And how on earth are you supposed to be effective if that's all you're thinking about at the back of your mind?
Yeah.
And I wondered if, maybe you could elaborate a bit on how do you create psychological safety within teams?
Yeah. And do you know what? I think it's a job that's never done, as it were. And then, so, there's I look at the teams and like, there's the kind of like my people I collaborate with, there's like my peers and bosses, and then my team. And I guess like there has to be a level of deep understanding of you as a human, like to a degree of like where you're coming from things, why might you behave in the way you behave? Why might you act, and that is a bit about self-awareness, right? So ultimately, are you self-aware of like why you behave in the way you behave, and can you explain that to somebody comfortably so that they might understand you a little bit more? So there's a bit about your self-awareness to start with. Then it's actually how do you get them to be aware of who you are and what drives you, what motivates you, and then build that understanding of them. And then actually, like, how do you create moments and spaces and places for people then to build on that and develop those relationships, and then have difficult conversations when they need to have those conversations. It takes time. And I'll be honest with you, I can't sit here saying I've perfected it. There are definitely relationships I need to work on. There's definitely relationships in my team that need to get better. But I would say often bring in external help in that one, because I kind of find that, people will certainly open up to somebody who's more objective, or even from a coaching or psychologist background that can ask the right questions, pull it out. But also yourself, if you can, work with someone externally to really understand you and what your drivers are, how you might behave and how that might manifest, and so on and so forth. So you can either catch yourself before you're doing it, or you can explain to somebody why you reacted or why you might do something in a way you where you do it.
It's great. Really great advice.
Self-understanding, really. Yeah.
So important.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's clear that you love the craft of marketing, straightforwardly, but also some of the things you've talked about, like stakeholder management, competing more broadly, customer strategy. My sense is that what could be available in your career is to move into general management, and this is the decision that many marketers face: do I stick or twist? As much as you can say or know, how do you think about future career paths between sticking to what you know and love versus that broader business impact?
Some of it terrifies me. like one of the things I've learned about myself over the years is I often had a fear of failure, a very high bar. And, ultimately sometimes that can manifest itself in me pushing myself too hard or pushing others too hard. And so, when I think about, do I become a CEO or something like that, immediately I go to, what if I fail? What would happen? Like that sounds big and terrifying and all of those things. And so, in my head, I'm kind of more grappling with those feelings than I'm feeling with actually the kind of functional aspects of the role. Obviously, you could get, all your weak spots you can hire into. And obviously, like they always say, you can get somebody to ask the right questions, or you need to be able to ask the right questions of individuals and set up the right systems and processes and operating rhythms and all of that. I think the big thing for me is I actually have to get over myself before I even think about whether I do it or not. So
it's really interesting, and I think the other thing we picked up related to this is, as you say, didn't go to university, and for the longest time thought long and hard about that, and how that impacts. But there'll be people listening in here who, whether that be been to university not, or other elements of their career that they feel they should have but not necessarily do have in their own minds, what would you say to them? How would you rationalize that for them and being able to? I mean, you've had an illustrious career, and you're in an incredible position. So you've overcome lots of things both in your mind as well as in the real world.
Yeah.
So how would you think about it?
What I'm probably going to say, you're going to go, why don't you just hold that mirror up to yourself for a minute? I guess and I guess for me, it's obviously like, what's that, for me it'd be what's their ambition, and actually do they really, really know what it might take to get there, what that sacrifice might be, and are they willing to put that in?
Yeah.
I would say that's kind of a big thing, because when I think about, the conversations I have around promotions and all that stuff, sometimes, that role that you want to go into sounds really exciting and, fruitful, and, there's a lot of recognition and reward that comes with it. But actually also sometimes you might not really truly realize the cost, whether that be your time or your energy or whatever, right?
So true.
That goes with it.
So true.
So I think there would be for me, it'd be like, apart from kind of like, what's your purpose? What's your direction in life? And breaking that down. And that's generally how I do things. I'd also be asking them, like, what are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to like give up? And like, do you really know what it's going to take to get to where you want to get to in terms of that sacrifice, and are you willing to make it? So I think that's so one for me. And to your point, my sacrifice is actually, can I get over myself and my fear of failure into a space and place that I would feel probably uncomfortable for a time if I went into that, because it's a much broader scope, for the rewards at the end of it. So
I'm sorry, I don't get this. I don't get it, because you've done some phenomenal things. We talk about first mover. We talk about innovation. Maybe part of it is evidence-based led, so therefore reducing the risk. But at the same time, you're still thinking on a personal level.
Yeah.
That you've still got a few gremlins to face on that front.
Yeah.
How do we reconcile the two? Because it feels like you're up for the charge, and still you're maybe afraid inside. I don't know how that works.
Probably need to get on with it, to be honest with you. It's a bit like the Matt Damon thing. I probably just need to go and solve the first problem, and then the next one and the next one. Do you know what I mean? In a way.
So true. Yes.
And go actually sit down and go, well, if I did want to go into that space and place, and I haven't decided myself yet, to be honest, is actually, what's the first problem I need to solve? And maybe it's imposter syndrome is the first problem I need to solve.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, I like that.
We can have a conversation offline, but I had a brilliant coach in 2014 who helped me unpick the neurology of imposter syndrome.
Really interesting.
Its origin, its purpose, and a complete flip on, I mean, in a nutshell, the things you doubt yourself for, are the talents that have been nurtured from the age of 3 to 18.
Right.
When that feedback loop collapses
Right.
in adulthood, your subconscious brain is saying, well, I thought I was good at those things.
Yeah.
And so you end up doubting yourself for the things you're talented in and tend to overdo, undervalue them to the point of extreme. So I've got a whole shtick on that as a,
great. Sounds
as a
awesome.
we'll pick that one up
definitely.
offline. But it does make total sense to me, because 93% of the world does have imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
It's only sociopaths, narcissists, and psychopaths who don't need that validation loop into adulthood.
I'm glad I'm not in that 7%.
Yeah, there you go. So I mean, it's probably a good one. I'm going to change tack quite wildly. Into, we mentioned about Spain, and you run a multinational team, and obviously that's gone amazingly well.
Yeah, really well. Yeah.
And so maybe for people listening in, big senior CMOs who are thinking internationally, what have been some of your learnings about launching and scaling in new markets?
Yeah. Oh gosh. So I think there's definitely market readiness. So the definition of market readiness. So I think, I working with my sort of like commercial colleagues and financial colleagues, when you look at the market and you go, this is the total addressable market, here's how much it's worth, et cetera, et cetera. Actually, like, just kind of when if you don't do enough of the customer strategy, you kind of can overestimate what actually you can really win in. So for me, when I look at a total addressable market and I go, yeah, those numbers look lovely and rosy and big. Well, actually, have you got the right thing for those customers? How hard is it to change them out of the habits that they're entrenched in now, and what's that going to cost? And therefore, like, ultimately, like, do the numbers stack up? So, like, you're going to forecast, I'm going to get X number of new customers and this retention rate off the base of this level of investment. Well, if you don't really understand those key fundamentals on your customer strategy side, you could completely underestimate what it's going to take. And I think, as we've gone into different markets, we've gone, okay, do we really understand enough about this problem space? Because when we've tested things, we've gone, oh, actually, we thought maybe these customers would come quicker than we thought they would. And then some of them have come like surging. Do you know what I mean? And so actually, I think my biggest learning is actually just really take the time to unpack some of the market view to that customer level strategy and go, have I got all of the recipe to make a beautiful cake here? And ultimately, like, when I deploy it, get the learnings as quickly as possible and then iterate as you go. Because obviously, you're only really going to learn when you start applying some of this stuff. And so, yeah, just, I would say, do the math really on the problem and really get there. Yeah. And then ultimately you'll find where you're at. And I think part of that also is what I call myth busting. So with the team, you will often get people might say in different meetings or contexts, oh, it's because of this, it's because of trust, or it's because of this perception, or it's because of this. And then you go, is it really? Like, curiosity, go, how much of that is really a problem or not? And then just kind of scratch away at it a little bit. And then you kind of like go, well, I'll put it to the side, or actually, yeah, that is a big thing I need to go and address. So I think it's like, really being a bit relentless of actually going, this is how we need to deploy this playbook to win, and relentless at learning and deploying new things and being curious and along the way. So.
I love your analogy when you said, do we have the full cake to be able to win? I think that's really smart. And actually what you said earlier was you've scientifically got to a point in the UK context of 60-40, as you described it.
Yeah.
And I wonder how you think about when you're getting into a new market, how do you get to the point of establishing, I mean, in the early days, what does the 60-40 look like? Or indeed, over time, how do you get to that, the right balance of things?
Yeah.
And maybe you think about it differently versus an entrenched market versus how you scale initially. Is it more skewed to brand, more skewed to performance? How does that sort of work in your mind?
I guess that if you are obviously brand new in a market and nobody knows who you are, that there's the element of like the economics of the business. So how, like, what can you really afford to lean into? I would say is obviously a core input, and assuming you've got all the recipe right, all the ingredients, the right product, the proposition, all that, assuming you've got all of that, I think ultimately you've got, like, you need to scale awareness, but you need to find the tipping point to which actually you start getting some more efficiency from your awareness, and actually it starts pouring into, customers at a lower cost and a higher LTV. And so that's kind of like the journey you need to go on of like, where is the tipping point? Find it, and find it as quickly as you can. And it takes time, and it takes, ultimately within that journey of trying to find that tipping point, you're going to need to try and find channels which are delivering ROI and the efficiency ultimately you like. So you're building your playbook to this tipping point, and then ultimately then you evolve your playbook again, if that makes sense.
Yes, of course.
It's kind of like, it definitely is like, there's no like, oh, in 1 year's time we'll find the tipping point, or 2 years time we'll find the tipping point. It's like, you might find it like really quickly. It might take a while. And then actually, if you, in that process, you learn this thing is just never going to work, or this thing is just never going to like pay back in the way we want it to, you have to make big decisions, strategic decisions at that time, and go pull out or slow down, or just face into that. It's going to cost that for that period of time. And so I think it's just constantly asking yourself, is this the right thing to do? Have we got the right information? Do we want to continue in this way? And I guess that's part of the growth mindset thing as well.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because humans are very susceptible to confirmation bias.
Yeah.
And wanting things that they've owned to work. So give us an example where you've had to really difficultly call time on something.
Yeah. Oh God, there's a few actually. I think I feel like one of the easiest ones to refer to now, but was the hardest at the time, but also extremely obvious, is imagine being at Skyscanner and COVID comes along, and like the world is grounded, obviously, and you're a flight search engine. Right? Like, I know, and you go, okay. And so, ultimately you go, right, brand, right, stop right now, like immediately, like what are you solving for right there and then? Like, you don't know, right? The whole world is just completely grounded. And so, in that instance, there was a market condition that just said stop. And then it was like, right, okay, fine. Now change path, change trajectory. And it was like, what do you do? How do you show up as a flight search engine when there's no flights happening? Like, how do you show up in that way?
How do you show up?
That's a good question.
That was the question I was asking. I mean, it was like a bit of an existential crisis somewhat, and actually it was like, well, what we do know is that, we're a highly trusted brand. People still want to travel. They are desperate for information on how to travel and how to get to places. So it's kind of those things. And then the other thing was, we've got partners who want to be able to sell flights again. And actually they don't know what to do and how to manage this situation. They don't have teams or the data to do it. So very quickly in that instance, it was like, right, we're going to make some data products that actually, take external factors, take sentiment, and turn it into a product that we can take to market in a couple of ways. One was, we took it to journalists, and we became the voice of travel. And actually, when things are happening, so every week we were on the BBC talking about, when do we think, what's sentiment, what's happening in the world of travel, where are people kind of like flying from and to. So it kind of like gave a really clear picture. And then for partners and suppliers, it was like actually a predictive tool as much as possible. So I think in that instance, like, I mean, it sounds on reflection, well, that should have been quite easy, right? You pull the plug. But the hard part was, what do you do next?
Exactly.
You can't just stop. You can't just go, well, my business is just on pause. So
it's really playing into this notion that we are describing about solving the problem at hand, and then being able to move on to the next and the next, and that sort of rolling sort of snowball sort of effect takes shape, and then you land on a better answer. Interesting. I mean, so Jo, you've been recognized in the top 100 marketers.
Yeah,
very cool. So what do you think differentiates standout marketers today?
I guess it comes back to the point at the beginning. I think it's about being the protagonist. I really do. And actually, great marketeers keep things moving forward and pushing things forward. And I think the danger is in lots of cases where, the economy's a difficult situation, consumers are in difficult situations with their spending or whatever it be, you can become reductive. So you can either become reductive through, well, the data's telling me this, therefore we should pull back, or this is happening in the market, we should pull back. And I think, like, if you just behave in that reductive way, you shrink over time, right? You don't innovate, you don't like when things start to get positive, you're not there. So for me, it's like, well, with those conditions in mind, like, what are you going to do? How do you push through? And the Skyscanner example is a classic one in obviously a very, very difficult time. But also like at Trainline, it would be like, okay, well, maybe it might be something like, in Spain, there's a problem with supply and Renfe, there's problems with tracks and tracks are closed. And what do you do in that situation? Or, things in the market have not come as quickly as possible. What do you do in terms to drive growth? So I think it's like, to be a brilliant marketeer today, you have to just keep pushing things forward and pushing that thinking, and just avoid being reductive in any way, shape, or form.
I'm really reminded of campaigns in this regard where there's been mega problems. The astronomer one was a great one where they responded with Gwyneth Paltrow, etc.
Oh, that one, yes. Yeah,
really cool. But it really spars me when we talk about the protagonist. It's almost about thinking what's your next move and how do you do it in a productive way. And ultimately, when I think about a marketing lens, all too often we get pigeonholed, as we all know, across 1P over the holistic view. But I suspect great marketers are able to see problems across the spectrum, pulling more than just a comms lever.
Yeah.
So how do you view that in terms of problem solution when you're sitting as a marketer? Maybe you don't have all the levers to hand.
Yeah. I kind of go, I always have like a bank of questions, like big questions I'm trying to answer. And there's usually like 5 or 6. There's never like, it's not like 20. And I'm working on 2 at the moment, for example. So, and I usually, some of them I align with my colleagues on. I go, hey, I'm going to go and try and answer these big questions because I think we need the answer to them. Do we agree? Yes, no. And it's kind of like, and some of them I'm going, this is a big question. I don't know what's going to come out of it, but I've got a hunch that actually there might be something really interesting. We might do something off the back of it. So I think it's like, I always start with like, what are all the possibilities of the things you could do? Okay, what are all, like, I kind of always start up here and I never start down here. I go like, what all the things you could possibly do? What are the questions that like need answering to kind of look to that? And then I bring in the right people at the right time, whether that be an amazing strategist at a creative agency, who I think that role is just so underrated. I think it's just an amazing role. Or a brilliant insight person, or bring those people together, or a brilliant product person. I go, I'm trying to answer this question. And I think between us, 3 or 4 people, we can come up with a good view, and then we can bring it to the table and provoke discussion, provoke thinking, and provoke thought. And that's being the protagonist again, right? It's going, I'll give you one example now. One of the questions on my list, which I haven't nailed, and I actually am not working on at the moment, but I'm going to at some point, is around word of mouth. So I kind of go, word of mouth is so many things to different people. And actually, it's such a powerful tool. Like we've already talked about it here on how you use Trainline and you really rate it. And that's word of mouth. You've talked to me about a product and how you think and feel about it. And actually, what do you do with that as a lever? Like word of mouth is a lever. Now, normally you go into, do social media campaigns, you do this, you do recommend a friend, all of these traditional types of approach. But is there another way in? I don't know. Maybe there is. I kind of feel that there might be, but it's one of those big questions I have.
word of mouth to 50,000 views. I mean, that's product placement. If it made me think. I think I implicitly had some big questions in my head, but I never sort of said out loud, here's the big questions I'm working on. Makes me think I missed a trick there back in the day. But you also talked about orchestration and building a team and so on. So I want to talk a little bit about talent and how do you build talent specifically in a context where, my God, the rules of the world are changing. People are still ambitious, of course, but how to construct and carve a career. So how do you support? Because if you're only as good as your team,
absolutely.
How do you support and develop talent internally?
I always start with, how do I describe it? I always start with this thing because, like, have they got a sharpness to them? Mm-hmm. And what I mean by a sharpness is, or an edge. When presented with like a problem or an opportunity, like, do they go away and answer it, or do they go and answer it plus 50 or 20% more? Like they come back with something a little bit more.
Over deliver.
Yeah. So I always think I look for kind of edge or sharpness, and I think to myself, when someone naturally has that, there's something that's kind of like already I'm going, there's something that you can already kind of like dial into and really dial up. there's sometimes people have it, but they're afraid of it and they have some imposter syndrome. So it's like, how do you extract it? And you can see it in those individuals. So there's always that. I always start off kind of like what they're intrinsically, how they behave in terms of that. There's a bit about obviously their natural talent, what they're really naturally good at. And then there's like, what does the business need? And it's kind of, I think it's sometimes super hard to find like all of those things to work beautifully. And like, and I really, really do struggle at times to find great talent, and actually to fill roles where, it really needs you to be sharp and think differently. And it really needs you to, respond to situations with high resilience and because of this changing world. And I think it's actually a little bit about, well, when you find great people, how do you nurture them and having a really good nurture program in place? And actually, how do you put them in situations where, I'll throw your life raft if you start drowning, but actually, if you really want this, it's going to be really hard. And, I'm going to push you really hard, but if you really, really want it, just let's go for it. And I think, so I kind of go, I probably am more emotive on that. And I lean into more of kind of like the feeling of an individual. And often I think, obviously the results are part of that. And I would expect to see the results if it's the feelings working out right. But I guess for me, it's like just leaning into that, what that individual is really good at and what they really want and their motivations and how to nurture it, as it were.
Nice.
I like the thought when you talk about throwing them a life raft. Yeah. And I think that's important. I think it, as a true leader, providing a level of air cover to allow them to make those mistakes, to champion them, evoke that growth mindset, all of those things are really important. And if you're a leader, you're not doing that, then I think ultimately your team are going to suffer because they won't be as brave as perhaps you need them to be.
Yeah. People have done it for me. So at the end of the day, throughout my career, I've had life rafts for sure. So yeah, it's kind of paying it forward in some respects, but ultimately, I think there is also a little bit about sometimes there's a bit of making sure it's not too much air cover, right? That ultimately, like, it actually damages their development, and they don't get some of the hard hits, and actually you don't get some of the resilience built as a result of it. So sometimes it's about finding the moments where you need to like peel back a bit of the air cover and go, you need to experience the full force or full challenge.
God.
And then does that make, it's kind of,
it does make sense.
It's really hard.
It is a balance, and it's a leadership challenge, right? As to when do you dial up, dial down? When do you let them know that they feel your presence versus let them get on with it. Jo, this has been a wonderful conversation, fascinating. And so in terms of final questions, and we talked a lot about teams and career development and the like, but I mean, we're in a very changing world. We talked a bit about AI and staying at the forefront of it. I mean, what advice would you have for somebody today who's in the midst of their careers, looking to get into senior leadership, but yet, as we see the world today, it's fairly uncertain and volatile? What would the advice you'd give to somebody?
I'd probably say be curious. So just always try and, think things through, maybe think through a different lens, think things through differently, and try and solve problems that actually maybe people don't know that are there or whatever. So be curious, I would say, and just lean in. I think like if you lean into things and you try and fix things and you try and get things done, like I always often say it to the team, I say, just do the work. Like, I don't say it like, do the work. I'm like, if you just do the work and get the job done and you're curious with it, you'll get noticed and you'll get opportunities. Talking about doing the work or talking about here's an approach, whatever, doesn't get it done, and therefore you don't get the results. And I think in most cases, I think there's a viral video of Barack Obama like says something like he's something like, there's always these clever people in the room that can explain a problem really well, but actually I'm just looking for the person that says, I'll solve that for you. And I am genuinely in that headspace. Like, just for me, if you're at any point in your career, just get the job done, get the work done, and actually do it. Be curious with it, and ultimately you'll get noticed. So,
great advice.
Love that. Wonderful conversations, cakes, sandcastles, life rafts, so many metaphors, but also lovely, rich insights. Thank you.
No, thank you. I've really enjoyed it as well. Yeah, thank you.